Okay, so we're at one of the more interesting places in the city, definitely one of the more colourful places. Oh, there's somebody coming out of there. You know something, I feel a bit jailbait doing this here. I think I'm going to go across the street and talk to you about this. I just want to show you it first. But I am absolutely not going on camera here. I'll explain to you why in a wee minute. Alright, so this is a bit of an awkward one, so I'm going to race through this and I'm going to get away from here. Because, I don't know about you, but where I come from, if you are sitting outside a school wearing a recording device, especially when you approach the place wearing a mask, you're probably going to end up on the non-swing of the nearest correctional facility, and I don't really fancy that, to be honest. So let's get through this quickly. Behind me it's essentially a massive school, and it's starting to rain. I'm going to go and find some shelter. So before I was so rudely interrupted by the elements, you can now see that the sun is splitting the trees, because this place just kind of does that. One minute it rains, next minute it's very sunny and quite hot. Sort of reminds me of Scottish summertime. But anyway, let me tell you about this place, because this place is one of the most interesting places I've ever read about. Now this behind me is Mostar Gymnasium, which, contrary to what I thought when I first seen it, I thought gymnasium, I thought that's a fancy looking gym, but of course I'm stupid. And I didn't realise gymnasium in other parts of Europe doesn't mean gym, it means essentially a high school of sorts. Now before this place existed, if you can try and imagine this for a minute, before this place existed there was only primary schools in Mostar. So what that meant was if you wanted your children to go to university or any sort of higher education, you had to send them to Sarajevo. Now you can imagine how annoying that would have been to do that today. That would be a pain. Can you imagine how annoying that would have been over 100 years ago? Exactly. So the place was built basically because the Serbian Orthodox community decided they wanted somewhere in Mostar to send their kids so they could send them to university a bit closer to home. The local government were a bit hesitant because they thought to themselves that the majority population at the time, which at that point was Muslims, they didn't think Muslims would want to send their kids to the same schools as Serbian Orthodox children. So the Serbian Orthodox community said, okay, maybe that's true, maybe that isn't true, we'll find out, but we've got the Catholics on our side. So you had the Serbian Orthodox community and you had the Catholic community who said, we will go to our kids to the same high school, that's not a problem for us. So the local government relented after a while and they built this thing. I mean, if you look at it, it's absolutely stunning. So they built it, and much to everyone's surprise and much to a lot of people's dismay, even to this very day, but I'll explain that a bit later, not only did the place start enrolling Serbian Orthodox kids and Catholic kids, they also started enrolling Muslim kids and Jewish kids as well. The kids are okay, the kids know their stuff, the kids just want to learn, in my experience. They don't care about the silly politics of their parents. But anyway, so this place opened up and it was a hub of learning. The wee woman there must be wondering what I'm up to. I think you'd be used to tourists by now, but apparently not. It looked at me as if I had horns in my head. But anyway, this place was a centre of learning. They had a lot of really high profile academics, they had some high profile students here, including a former Prime Minister who was actually expelled from this school for being a radical communist. He was expelled in 1931, he then later on became a Prime Minister. Take from that what you will. So this place was a place of learning, everybody kind of blended together, they learned different curriculum, well the same curriculum, but they learned different subjects, they learned about each other's cultures, each other's languages, they learned the sciences, they learned literature, they learned all the stuff you would want to learn at a secondary school. But then of course comes, in the 1990s, the Croat-Bosnian War. Now what basically happened was that this place was on the front lines during that time and it got blown up quite significantly. The place was a mess. It wasn't as nice as it is now. They've revamped it. I think they refurbished it and they fixed it up basically. I think it was in the early 2000s. Now, from the end of the Bosnian War, Bosnian-Croat War, it would have been in this case, from the end of that war up until early 2000s, I think it was around about 2004, you only had Croat Bosnian kids going to the schools. It wasn't until the early 2000s that you got the Bosniaks, aka the Muslims, going back to the same school. Now that didn't sit right with some people. Some Croats felt that their culture was being erased and all this sort of nonsense. And in fact, even to this day, I think it's the current, or maybe it's a former education minister, said that apples and peaches should not mix. When that's the mentality of one of your education ministers, what chance have you got? But this school, just as it had done when it was first constructed, it defied local government, it defied local nationalist politicians. Now I'm not talking about the good nationalists, the ones that just want a wee bit of independence. I'm talking about the bad nationalists. I don't need to explain those guys to you, you know what those people are all about. They did not want their kids mixing with the Muslim kids and vice versa. But this school, just as it has done throughout its entire history, it seems, defied them and decided, nah, we don't care where you come from. If you want to learn, come along and learn. Which is, for me, is what a school should be. It shouldn't be about segregating people into, you're this group, we're that group, apples and peaches, as that individual, let's just say individual, as that individual had to say. So now I think there's slightly more Bosniak kids than there are Croat kids. I think it's not a big difference, it's like 290 to 360, it's not a massively big amount. But I did hear a wee rumour about it. And the rumour I heard was that they have two different curriculums now. They both learn their own stuff, but the kids, they mingle at interval time, you know, at break time. And I heard that sometimes there's been known to be a wee bit of flirting going on between the two groups. Because ultimately, when it comes to teenagers, politics are one thing, but it's all about the hormones. So I mentioned to you that the gymnasium across the road there, that I am very reluctant to go too near with this camera, as I already explained to you. I mentioned that that was on the front lines of the war. If you look directly across the road from that, you have this, which I think they might have just left there as a sort of symbol as to what happens when you start an unnecessary war with your neighbours. If you can imagine the gymnasium across the road, that beautiful building across the road there, looking a wee bit like that a few years ago. So you go from this during wartime, and during peacetime where people try and get along, you can have something like this. That for me sort of epitomises Mostar, it epitomises most of Bosnia, to be honest. You have the scars of the past where people were fighting, and you have a modern, quite vibrant country from what I've seen so far, full of people that just live alongside each other. They have their differences, they have their own ideas, but ultimately it's about living alongside your neighbours, and that's the important thing in my view.